Hello everyone, my name is Pipin Abram and in today's video we'll be solving CBSE's latest physics sample question paper. Right, so basically we have already solved the first section of this paper in our previous video. In this particular video we'll be solving the section B of the sample question paper. So for all those who want to watch the section A part, you guys, the link will be there in the description. You guys can go and check that out. Also, for all those people who are new to channel, please do subscribe and do like and share the content. With that being said, let's get started. So as I said, we have already done the section A in our previous video, and this is section B. Let me just read it out very quickly. This section consists of 24 multiple choice questions with overall choice to attempt any 20 questions. Okay, in case more than desirable number of questions are attempted, only first 20 will be considered for evaluation. So basically in this particular section you will be getting 24 multiple choice question, out of which you are expected to attempt 20 questions, and by mistake if you have attended more than 20 questions, then the first 20 questions will be considered for evaluation, right? Okay, so let's move to our first question. So first question means we are talking about 26 question because section A had your 25 questions. So the first question of section B, that is your 26th question. Let me just read it out. Okay, a cylinder of radius r and length L is placed in uniform electric field, great, parallel to the axis of cylinder. Okay, the total flux for the surface of the cylinder is given by, okay, four options are there: 0, pi r square, E multiplied by pi r square, 2E multiplied by pi r square. All right, let me just very quickly draw the diagram. So you have a cylinder of radius r. So here is our cylinder. So here is our cylinder, right? And this cylinder is of radius r. Let's say this is my radius r. All right, great. Then and length L, the length is L, okay, is placed in uniform electric field parallel to the axis of cylinder. So let's say this is my axis of cylinder, right? So you have your electric field. Let me just draw the electric field. Okay, so you have your electric field here, uniform electric field, right? So I have my uniform electric field here, right? So my electric field is actually parallel to the axis. So this is my axis. So it is parallel to the axis. Very good. The total flux for the surface of the cylinder is given by, right? So total flux on the surface, right? Obviously, so we have to talk about the flux here. So let me very quickly. So basically you guys can see there are three surfaces. First surface, that is your circular surface. This is your second circular surface, and then your curved surface, right? So let me just number this. This is my first surface, this curved one is second, and again back to my third surface, right? So I have three surfaces. So we'll talk about flux through each surfaces, and we have to find out the total flux for the surface of the cylinder, right? Okay, so let's do that. So for the first surface, you guys can see, we know that flux is given as E times of your area vector. Is that a yes or no? This is how you actually find out the flux, right? So you can also write it like this: EA of your cos theta, where theta is the angle between your electric field and your area vector for that particular surface, right? Okay, so let me talk about first surface. So for first surface, so for the first surface, you guys can see my electric field is coming out, right? Okay, very good. And we can say the area vector is also coming out. Area vector is also coming out. Yes or no? So I can simply write, so flux from my first surface is simply given as electric field multiplied by area vector times of cos of theta, right? Where you guys can see the angle between E and A for the first surface is actually 0. Yes or no? This will be EA cos of 0. Cos of 0 is actually 1. That is E times of A, or I can simply write E multiplied by area is actually pi r square, right? So this is for the first surface. Let's go to the second surface. So for the second surface, you guys can see the area vector is always perpendicular to the surface in the outward direction, right? So for this surface, the area vector is in the upward direction, right? And you guys can see the electric field is still in that direction only, right? So can you guys see the angle between them is actually 90 degree? For the second surface, you guys can see the area vector and your electric field is making an angle of 90 degree. Is that a yes or no? I hope you guys can see that. Yes. Okay, so if you guys can see this, so I can simply write flux through your phi 2 will surface will be equal to ea of cos of theta, right? Okay, great. So this is ea of cos of 90 because the angle here is 90, and cos 90 we all know comes out to be 0. Yes or no? Cos 90 is actually 0. So your phi 2, the flux through your second surface is actually 0. Great. Let's talk about the third surface then. Third surface, you guys can see this is my third surface, right? Third surface. Let me use different pens so you guys can see that. Okay, red pen. All right, this is my third surface, right? Third surface. All right, so area vector will be perpendicularly out to the surface, but you guys can see my electric field is still in that direction, right? So I can very nicely see the angle between them is actually 180 degree, right? You have to understand the angle between A and your electric field for this particular surface is actually 180 degree, right? Yes. Nice. Okay, so I know the angle is 180 degree. Then I can actually find out. I can write it here. So I have flux through your third surface. It is ea cos of theta. Yes. So phi 3 will be equals to ea cos of 180 degree. Okay, so for all those who do not know, cos 180 has a value of -1, right? Okay, all right, so I'll just put that there. This is ea times of -1, or you can write it e minus of e. Area is actually pi r square. Is that a yes or no? So the phi 3, the flux through your surface 3 is actually equals to minus of e pi r square. So the question was asking us to find out the net flux, the total flux. Can you guys see that? Total flux will be simply the addition of all the fluxes, because flux is actually a scalar quantity. Is that a yes or no? Right. So net flux will be simply equals to flux from your first surface plus flux from your second surface plus flux from your third surface, right? Flux from your first surface is actually E multiplied by pi r square. E multiplied by pi r square. Very good. Flux from your second surface, it is 0. Okay. Flux from your third surface, that is minus E times of pi r square. So this is actually minus E times of pi r square. I hope you guys can understand. Now you have to see this is plus E multiplied by pi r square, this is minus E multiplied by pi r square, and in between you have a 0. So basically the answer comes out to be 0. Is that a yes or no? The net flux will be actually 0. Yes. So let me just see to the option whether 0 is there in the option. Yes, it is there. First option is actually 0. Yes. Okay, let's move to our second question. Okay, this is our second question. Great. Okay, second question. Two parallel large thin metal sheets have equal surface densities, and the value is actually given 26.4 into 10 to the power minus 12 coulomb meter square, okay, of opposite signs. Obviously one will be having positive of this, and the one will be having negative of this. Great. The electric field between these sheets is, so basically you can actually make a parallel plate capacitor, right? So basically you have a parallel plate capacitor. Just assume that you have a parallel plate capacitor. So I have two parallel plate capacitor, right? So one will be having obviously plus sigma, then obviously the other will be having the negative sigma, right? So plus sigma, that means the density is given 26.4 into 10 to the power minus 12. On the other hand, this one is given minus 26.4 into 10 to the power minus 12. Is that a yes or no? And in the question, the electric field between these sheets, you are supposed to find out the electric field between these sheets. So you are supposed to find out electric field here. So we all know this entire plate is actually positively charged, right? And this entire plate is actually negatively charged. Keep that thing in your mind. All right, so in order to find out electric field, one of the basic thing we have to do is we have to bring a positive test charge and place it over here. Let's say this is some point O, right? So this positive test charge will be experiencing a force, and obviously in the direction of force will be the electric field, will experience electric field because of positive plate in that direction. Very similarly, this positive charge will experience a force again in the same direction because of this negative plate, right? Let me call it E negative, right? So the net, I can say the net electric field inside will be simply equal to E because of the positive plate plus E because of the negative plate. Is that a yes or no? right? Now I know the value of electric field because of, value of electric field, at the surface of a metal sheet, right? Now I already know the value is sigma upon 2 epsilon naught, right? Okay, so both the values will be simply added, so the net electric field inside will come out to be, yes, this will be sigma upon epsilon naught, yes or no? Or I should say the net electric field is coming inside the, both the sheets is actually sigma upon epsilon naught, right? Where sigma is actually your charge density, which is like given in the question, right? Okay, and what is epsilon naught? Epsilon naught is actually the permittivity of free space, right? Now this is known to us, permittivity of free space, right? Okay, so all we have to do is just put the values here, right? So I'll just simply put the values here, put the values. E net will be equal to sigma, the value is given to us, that is 26.4. This is 26.4 into 10 to the power minus 12, 10 to the power minus 12 divided by your epsilon naught has a value of 8.85 into 10 to the power minus 12. So you guys can see this will automatically cancel out, and the electric field inside will be simply equal to, obviously the final unit will be Newton per Coulomb, right? Yes or no? So this is 264 divided by, yes, this is 885, 2 zeros here, 1 0 here, this will be cancelled out. This is 2640 upon 885, right? So when you divide it, you will approximately get 3, because you guys can see 885 3 times, 5 here 15, 5 8 28 8 4 25 24 25 26, right? So approximately you guys can see that values are similar, right? So approximately you will get 3, it will be actually 2.9 something, right? So yeah, so this is 3 Newton per Coulomb, right? Let's see if it is there in the options. Yes, it is there, option number 4, right? Okay, all right, let's move to the next one. Next question, consider an uncharged conducting sphere, all right? A positive point charge is placed outside the sphere. The net charge on the sphere is then. So basically what is happening? Consider an uncharged conducting sphere. So when you have an uncharged conducting sphere, it does not mean that it is not charged. The number of positive and the negative charge are in balance. You actually say it like that. So for example, if it is uncharged, that means it will be having 10 positive charge. At the same time, it will also have 10 negative charge. That's how it becomes uncharged, right? Okay, so a positive point charge is placed outside the sphere. So let's say I have placed this positive point charge, which is like outside the sphere. The net charge on the sphere is then. So you have to understand, because of this positive charge, induction will happen, right? Electromagnetic induction will happen, and give the charges. For example, if it is positive charge, the first phase will have the negative charge, right? So you have 1 2 3 4 5 6 negative charge, and the opposite phase will have the positive charge, right? The equal number of positive charge, right? So because of induction, equal charges are induced on opposite phases. So you guys can see, because of the positive charge, you can see this phase is negatively charged now, and the opposite phase is positively charged now, right? So the question is, the net charge on the sphere is then. So you have to understand, the net charge on the sphere will still be 0. Nothing will happen to that fact, because obviously equal number of negative charge and equal number of positive charge. The net charge on this particular sphere will be still 0, right? So without any thinking, you guys can actually tick the option number 4, that is 0. I hope that is understandable, right? Okay, let's move to the next one. Okay, next question says that 3 charges, plus 2q, minus q and minus q, lie at the vertices of a triangle. Okay, great. The value of E and V, E means your electric field and V means your electric potential, right, at centroid of a triangle will be. So you have different options. You don't have to find out the exact value. E is not equal to 0 or V is not equal to 0. E is actually equal to 0. V is also equal to 0. E is not equal to 0 and V is equals to 0, E is equal to 0, and V is not equal to 0. Okay, so very quickly just draw a triangle first. So I have this triangle first, right? Okay, so one, it has 2q charge, one it has, you know, minus q charge, and in this one vertex it has again minus q charge, right? Now we're talking about centroid here. Centroid, we know it is the, you know, intersection point of all the three medians. So this point is the centroid. Let me just draw it. This point is actually the centroid. So we are supposed to find out electric field as well as your, you know, electric potential, right? So first, obviously, in order to find out the electric field, you will bring a positive test charge here at that point. Now, you know, because of this positive charge will going to experience a force in this direction. Let me call it electric field because of your 2q charge. Very similarly, this positive test charge will experience a force because of this minus q charge in this direction. Yes or no? So let me just draw it here. So the force will be in this direction. Very similar to the electric field. This is electric field because of your minus q charge. Very similarly, this positive test charge will experience a force because of the minus q charge in that direction, right? So I'll just draw it here. That will be your electric field. Electric field because of your minus q. Now you guys can very nicely see here, obviously when you add these two vector, you will have a vector along this particular vector, and entirely this vector will also add. So in entirety, I can very nicely say my electric field is not going to be equal to 0. It is going to be finite value. It will definitely have some particular value. It will not be equal to 0. First of all, it is not be equal to 0, and it will have some finite value, right? So let's see which option. So this option, E is not equal to 0 and E is not. So you have two options here, this one or this one. So we have to talk about potential also in order to confirm which one is our answer, right? Okay, so let's talk about potential also, right? So before I talk about potential, to understand this distance, and this distance, all these distances are same. So I'll just simply say this distance is actually, let me say this distance is actually some x, then this will also be x, this will also be x, right? Okay, great. Now let's talk about the potential, right? So potential at, let me call this point to be O point, potential at O, because of your 2q charge, right? Because of your 2q charge will be simply given as, yes, what will be the value? This will be k times of 2q, yes, upon some x. Yes or no? Okay, potential at O because of minus q charge, and I'll just simply double it so that you guys can get you know, the exact value. You don't have to do it 2 times. I'll just simply double it, right? So this is actually 2 times of k because of minus q. This will be minus upon x, right? And the final will be simply equal to the addition of both. And can you guys see these two are equal but with a negative sign? So when you add, the net potential will come out to be 0. Can you guys understand that? Yes or no? Yes? Okay. So from this, you can clearly see the option number 3 is correct because V is actually equal to 0 and your electric field is not equal to 0. So option number 3 is the correct answer. Is that a yes or no? Great. Let's move to our next question. Question number 30. So you have two parallel plate capacitors X and Y have the same area of plates and the same separation between the plates. Okay, X has air, Y with dielectric of constant 2 between its plate. They are connected in series to a battery of 12 volt. Okay, the ratio of electrostatic energy stored in X and Y. So we have two capacitors, right? So two parallel plate capacitor X and Y have the same area of the plates and the same separation between the plates. Okay, so you have two capacitors and they are connected in series, right? Same plate, between its plate, they are connected in series to a battery 12 volt. So it is connected to a series to a battery of 12 volt, right? So this is actually cell. Let me just make it battery. So this will be battery. This battery is of 12 volt, right? Okay, great. So you have to understand the first one, same separation. If it is X, then it's also X, right? Okay, same area of the plates. Area of the plates are same. This is A, then this is also A. Great. Same separation between the plates. X has air, so let me just call this one is X, this one is Y. So this one has air, the X1 has air in between, and Y is having some dielectric material of dielectric constant K is equals to 2, right? Okay, so they are connected in series to a battery of 12 volt. The ratio of electrostatic energy stored in X and Y, right? Okay, so we have to talk about the ratio of electrostatic energy stored here. So you have to understand this one will have some V1 potential, this one will have some V2 potential, right? And some current I will be flowing, some current I will be flowing, and some charge, because that current, some charge Q will be going. So both the capacitor will get the same charge Q. Yes or no? Okay, so you have to understand this one has, let's say this one has a capacitance of some C, because anyway Q charge is given and some potential is raised to V1, and this one will be having a capacitance of 2C. Is that a yes or no? So you have to understand, so for X capacitance will be simply equal to, you can just simply write it here. So for X capacitance will be equal to, I can write C is the capacitance, and for my Y the capacitance will be equal to, yes, this is 2 times of C, because whenever you have a dielectric inserted in between, if the dielectric is like fully inserted, then the capacitance will increase by the factor of dielectric, right? Okay, so for this one, the potential energy will be given as Q square by 2C, right? Very similarly, for this one also, potential energy will be equals to Q square by 2 times of 2C. Is that a yes or no? Right? Okay, so let me call it, this is for X and this is for Y. So U for X will be simply equals to Q square by 2C. U for Y will be simply equals to Q square by 4C. Is that a yes or no? The ratio of electrostatic energy between, okay, so Ux upon Uy I'm supposed to find out, right? So Ux is actually Q square by 2C divided by Q square by 4C, or you can simply write this is Q square by 2C multiplied by 4C upon Q square. This will cancel out, C will cancel out, this is 1, this is 2. So the answer is 2 is to 1. So we have to check whether it is there in our options. Yes, it is there. 2 is to 1 is the answer, right? Okay, let's move to our next question. Okay, this is our next question, question number 31. Which among the following is not a cause for power loss in a transformer? Okay, let's read out the options. Number 1, eddy currents are produced in the soft iron core of a transformer. So yes, eddy current is produced. Now you have to understand, because of the eddy currents, the transformer lost a lot of energy. Transformer lose a lot of energy because of eddy current. So this option is incorrect. Electric flux sharing is not properly done in primary and secondary coil. This is also one of the reason because of which your transformer actually lose energy. So this option is also wrong. Okay. Humming sound produced in the transformer due to magnetic restriction. Now that is also true, because of the humming sound there is a energy. It's actually, sound means it's actually some kind of energy loss, right? So this option is also wrong. Next one, primary coil is made up of a very thick copper wire. Okay, you have to understand, if your primary coil is made up of very thick copper wire, right? Let's say this is your primary coil. If it is made up of very thick copper wire, that means the area of cross section will increase. If the area of cross section will increase, you have to understand, if area of cross section will increase, we know resistance has a value of rho L upon A, right? So if area is increased, then the resistance is decreased. So if resistance is decreased, the energy loss will also be decreasing. Yes or no? So the answer to this question is actually this one. The primary coil is made up of very thick copper wire. Because of this, arrangement, the power loss is less in transformer, right? Okay, let's move to the next question. Question number 32. Question number 32 says, an alternating voltage source of variable angular frequency omega and fixed amplitude V is connected in series with a capacitance C and electric bulb of resistance R. Inductance is actually 0. So when omega is increased, what is going to happen? All right, so let's try to draw this. So you have AC source, right, which has a variable angular frequency. So your AC source omega can be increased and decreased, right? Okay, it has a fixed amplitude V. So the source has a fixed amplitude V, that is the maximum value, it is fixed, right? It is connected in series with a capacitor. 10C an electric bulb of resistance R. So you have a capacitor and a bulb, right? And a bulb of resistance R, right? This is having resistance R, right? It's connected with that AC source that the question is talking, right? Okay, so this AC source can be written as V sine omega t. Now this omega can be increased, that is the thing. So you can increase the value of omega. All right, okay. Now you can see this is some, this has some value of xc, and this is actually your resistance R, right? Okay, so capacitance has a capacitive reactance of xc, right? And we know xc can be written as 1 upon omega c, right? So according to the question, you are increasing the omega. So if you increase the omega, what will happen to this xc? What will happen to xc? If you increase omega, xc will decrease. Yes or no? The capacitive reactance will decrease. Yes or no? So if capacitive reactance is actually decreased, then I can say more and more current can flow through to into this wire, into this bulb. If more current is taken, then according to a formula, power is equals to I square R. I square R. More current is gone, the power will be more, and power is directly proportional to the brightness. Yes or no? So if power is increased, brightness will also increase. That means your bulb is going to glow brighter. Yes or no? Right? I hope that is understandable. That means first let's look at the option. The bulb will glow dimmer. No, the bulb glows brighter. Yes, this is the answer. The bulb is going to glow brighter. Second one is your answer. Is that a yes or no? I hope that's understandable, right? Okay, great. Let's move to our next question. Question number 33. A solid spherical conductor has charge plus q and radius r. Okay, it is surrounded by a solid spherical shell with charge minus q, inner radius 2r and outer radius 3r. Okay, so it is given in the, actually it's given in the picture diagram. Which of the following statement is true? Okay, you have different statement. You have to talk about which of the following statement is actually true, right? Okay, so let's just very quickly let's read the options. The electric potential has a maximum magnitude at C. Okay, the value of electric potential has a maximum magnitude at C. An electric field has a maximum magnitude at A. So basically we are talking about electric potential and electric field. So all the options are talking about this only: electric potential and electric field. Electric potential and electric field. Yes, electric potential and electric field. Okay, so we have to talk about electric potential and electric field. Okay, so let's very quickly see here what is actually happening. So this is your first conductor, which has 2 points A and B here, right? So you have given plus q charge. So we all know, so if you give plus q charge to a conductor, so all of the charge will be at the surface of your conductor. Is that a yes or no? The surface will be having your plus q charge, right? Let me call it, this is plus q charge. Okay, great. And it is surrounded by a solid spherical shell with charge minus q. So obviously you have given plus q charge to your first conductor, then obviously by induction the inner surface of your solid spherical shell will have negative charge, right? If it is positive, then this will have minus of q charge by induction, right? And because of that, you can understand there will be electric field from your plus to negative. From your plus to negative, there will be an electric field inside that empty space. You guys can see. Yes or no? There will be an electric field. I hope you guys can see that. You guys can understand, right? Okay, so according to the question, you guys can see you have 4 points: A, you have B, then you have C, and you have D. So we have to talk about electric field and we have to talk about potential. Electric potential. So you guys can see electric field will not be here. At outside there is no electric field, inside also there is no electric field, and inside also there is no electric field. The only electric field that you guys can see is actually in this particular region, and it is also like this, right? Electric field is like this. So you guys can very simply see the only electric field will be in this particular region, the empty region. Yes or no? And if I talk about the magnitude of your electric field, then you guys can see the magnitude will be maximum near the surface, right? So as you move away, the magnitude of the electric field will be less, right? So I can simply say my electric field will be maximum at this point, at B. Is that a yes or no? I hope you guys can understand the maximum value of electric field will be at point B, because A will not have any electric field. C will also have electric field, but again you have to understand it will not be maximum. It will definitely have some value, but it will not be maximum value. And at D you will not have electric field. Outside there is no electric field, right? Because there is no charge. You have to have charge for the electric field, right? Okay, great. So I got to know that your B point will be having the maximum electric field. Let's talk about electric potential now. Now electric potential also, again you require charge for that, right? So anyway, this entire thing will have the same potential. Very similar, this entire thing will also have the same potential, right? Okay, great. So you guys can see there is no charge, so there should not be no potential here also. But yeah, here you have charge, here you have charge. Again you have two places where you can actually find out the potential, right? Okay, so because of this negative charge, the potential will have a negative value, right? On the other hand, because of this positive charge, you will have a positive potential, which actually will be more as compared to your negative potential. So again, I'm suspecting that your B point will again have the maximum potential, right? You can actually calculate this, you can also calculate that, but by observing I can actually see that your B point also have your maximum potential. Is that a yes or no? And let's try to look at our options. The electric potential has maximum magnitude at C. Electric potential, no, that's wrong. This option is wrong. The electric potential has maximum magnitude at D. No, at D we will not find an electric field, right? So this is again wrong. The electric potential at A is 0. This is correct. The electric potential at A is actually 0. And the electric field has a maximum magnitude at D. No, this is again wrong. Both the electric potential and electric field achieve a maximum magnitude at B. This is correct, because we have suspected that at point B your E as well as your V is actually equal to 0. So answer to this question is actually option number 4. I hope that is understandable. Yes. Okay, let's move to our next question. This is question number 34. Okay, let's look at question number 34. A battery is connected to the conductor of non-uniform cross-section area. The quantities or the quantity which remain constant. Okay, great. So you have battery connected to a conductor which has like non-uniform area of cross-section. Let's say something like that. Or you can take any shape, right? It's not necessary that you take this shape. So you have 4 options. One option is here. Okay, we have some space to solve it. Okay, great. So you can take this shape, or you guys can take let's say this shape also. It does not matter, just take something non-uniform. Okay, all right. So you have a battery connected to the conductor of non-uniform cross section area. The quantities or quantity which remain constant. This is connected to a battery, right? So when it is connected to a battery, you guys can see the current will flow, right? Current will flow, and again current will flow through this your conductor also, and will come back. All right. Okay, so you have to understand here, you have to understand electric field will not be constant. Why? Because here the potential will be something like that, and here the electric field potential will be something like this, right? So the electric field we will be having something like this, right? So electric field will not be constant, right? It will not be constant value. So first option is wrong. Electric field is not constant. Drift speed and electric field. Now we have to understand, we know drift velocity is given as Vd is actually equal to it's actually equals to E times of capital E upon m times of tau, right? Also the value of current is given as Vna, that is Vd E and A, right? Or you can simply say from here your drift velocity is simply given as I upon E and A. So you have to understand your drift velocity, your current I current I will be constant because current I will have the same value because there is no blockage somewhere anywhere, right? So current I is something which I think that it is going to be a constant, right? So there is no blockage here, nothing there. So current I must remain constant, right? On the other hand, you guys can see the area has been changed. The area has been changed because here the area is different, here the area is different. So if the area is changed, so should your drift velocity or drift speed. So drift speed will also be changed. Electric field is already changed. So electric field and current is actually remains constant. Electric field again changed. Current only, yes, current only can be the answer. This is the answer to this question. I hope that is understandable. Let's move to our next question. The next question says, three resistors having values R1, R2, R3 are connected in series to a battery. Okay. Suppose R1 carries a current of 2 ampere, R2 has a resistance of 3 ohms, and R3 dissipates 6 watt of power. And the voltage across your R3 is. Okay, let's very quickly draw it. So we have 3 resistors. So R1, R2, and your R3, and they're connected in series and connected to a battery source, right? So you have this battery source, right? Okay, so R1 carries a current of 2 ampere. So you have to understand if R1 is carrying, so let's R1, R2 and R3. So you have to understand if R1 is carrying a current of 2 ampere, then as it is in series, so all of them will be having 2 ampere current. I hope you guys can understand that, right? You can manipulate that, concept, right? Okay, so you have 2 ampere current that is flowing in through your circuit. Great. Then let's move forward. Suppose R1 carries a current of 2 ampere, then R2 has a resistance of 3 ohm. So resistance of your R2 is given to you. There is 3 ohm, right? Okay, great. R3 is dissipating 6 watt of power. Okay, so R3 is dissipating 6 watt of power. 6 watt power is being taken, is being going out of your R3 resistance. Then the voltage across your R3. So R3, the voltage across your R3 is something which you have to find out, right? So obviously this will be divided into some V1 voltage, some V2 voltage, and some V3 voltage, and you have to understand this entire battery is giving you some V voltage, and V is actually equals to V1 plus V2 plus V3, right? So we will not look into that. So we will be talking about the resistance R3 because we are supposed to find out the potential across your R3. So this is actually, what all things are given. The power is given, there is 6 watt power, and the current is also given, this is 2 ampere. Now we know the formula here. The formula is power is equals to V multiplied by I know this formula, right? So we are supposed to find out V. So power is equals to V3 multiplied by I, right? Power is 6 divided by I is 2, that is your V3. This is 2, 3. The potential across your V3 is actually 3 volt. Let's see, it is there in option. Yes, it is there. I hope that is understandable, right? Yes, let's move forward. This is question number 36. A straight line plot showing the terminal potential difference V of a cell as a function of current drawn from it is shown in the figure. The internal resistance of the cell would be then. Okay, so we know the formula here. We know the terminal voltage is given as EMF minus I times of internal resistance. This is the formula which we know, right? Okay, so I can also write this thing as V is equals to minus IR plus epsilon naught, and I can compare this with your straight line equation, right? This is Y is equals to mx plus C. Is that a yes or no? So you have to understand, in your y-axis you will have voltage, and you guys can see in your y-axis I have my voltage. Very good. In your x-axis I should have current. So in my x-axis I have current, right? So you guys can see in my x-axis I have current, and the intercept or the constant will have the value of EMF, right? Okay, so from here I can simply say my slope will be equal to minus of R. The slope will actually give me, the negative of the slope will actually give me the value of internal resistance, right? So what I will do, I will just simply find out the slope here. Now how will I find out the slope? I will simply assume 2 points here, 1 point here and 1 point here. I'll assume 2 point here, and I will talk about the coordinate of these 2 points. This is 0.5 comma 4.2, and this one is actually 1.5 comma, yes, 1.4. Yes, I hope you guys can see that 1.5 comma 1.4, right? Now slope is actually given as y2 minus y1 upon x2 minus x1. So let me just say this is my x1 comma y1 and this is my x2 comma y2, right? So slope will be equal to, yes, y2 minus y1. So y2 is actually 4.2 minus y1. What is your y1? Y1 is actually 1.4 divided by, yes, what is your x2? X2 is actually 0.5 minus, what is your x1? It's actually 1.5, right? Okay, so this is, you guys can see, this is actually this will be 12 minus 8, this is 8 point, and this will be 2.8 divided by, you have a negative sign, and this is actually 1.0. So the slope is coming out to minus 2.8, right? And we know the slope is actually negative of your resistance, so I can write my r minus r will be equal to minus of 2.8, or your internal resistance is actually equal to 2.8 ohms. Yes or no? And let's see if it is there in our option. Yes, it is there in our option. It is there. All right, great. Let's move to our next question. Yes, it is a potentiometer question. You guys can see it from the look of it, right? Okay, so let's read the question. A 10-meter long wire of uniform cross section and 20 ohm resistance is used in a potentiometer. All right, the wire is connected in series with a battery of 5 volt along with an external resistance of 480 ohm. Okay, you guys can see 480 ohm. If an unknown EMF E, this one we are talking about, unknown EMF E is balanced at 6 meter length of the wire, then the value of unknown EMF is, okay, let's just simply just write all what all the things which is given to us. So a 10-meter long wire, so let me say this length is some, let's say this is my A, this is my Q, which is like given to me. So this length of your AQ wire is actually 10 meter, it's given in the question, right? And 10-meter long wire of uniform cross section and 20 ohm resistance is used in a potentiometer. So basically the resistance of this wire AQ is actually 20 ohm. This is also given to me. The wire is connected in series with a battery of 5 volt. So your EMF1 or your small EMF1, let me say, it is given to me 5 volt, right? Okay, and you have an external resistance of 480 ohm. Okay, if unknown EMF E is balanced as 6, so you are given a balance. So let me just say this is some O point. So length AO is also given to me. This is 6 meter, which is like the balancing length, right? So balancing length means at this particular point the galvanometer will not show any kind of deflection. That means the current will not flow through this particular wire, right, for when it is at 6, right? Okay, great. Okay, so you're supposed to find out the value of unknown EMF. You're supposed to find out the value of E. Okay, let's try to solve this. Now we know, let's say you got the balancing length, right? So at balancing length, you know the current will not flow through this circuit, right? Current is not going to flow through this circuit. The galvanometer will not show any kind of deflection. So when that is the situation, I can simply write the current that will flow in my other circuit, that is the current that is going to be flowing in my primary circuit, that can be written as the EMF dash divided by the resistance of my AQ wire plus the external resistance, that is your 480 ohm. Is that a yes or no? So this can be further written as the value, this is 5, RAQ is given to me as 20 plus 480 is the external resistance, or I can simply write 5 divided by 500, right? This is 1 and this is 100. So the value of current is 1 upon 100 ampere. This much current is being, flowing in your circuit. You have to understand this much current is being flowing in your circuit. That is your 1 upon 100 ampere. Okay, great, very good. So you have to understand when it is the balancing length, then we can simply say the potential across this point and the potential across this point should be similar, right? And this is with the help of your balance, potentiometer principle, we can write it here. The potential across your V AO will be equal to K times of the length AO, right? This is how we actually write it here. Now the problem here is I do not know the value of K. I have to find out the value of K first, right? So if I know the value of this potential gradient K, then I can find out the value of I can find out the value of EMF, right? So you have to understand at your balancing length, this will be actually equal to the EMF, right? The EMF which I want to find out, right? So because there is no current that is being flowing through this wire, then at that time the potential across your battery is actually the EMF, right? So I can find the value of EMF with this. The only thing which is like keeping me from finding the EMF of this battery is this potential gradient. So I have to first find out this potential gradient. Now how I can find out? So I know with the same principle I have just used, the potential across the entire wire AQ, VAQ, is also given as K times of the entire length, that is your LAQ, right? Also, but I can also use Ohm's law here, that is VAQ can also be written as I times of RAQ. Is that a yes or no? Now VAQ can be written as, I know the value of I here, right? The value of I is 1 upon 100 multiplied by RAQ. So RAQ is given to me, that is your 20 ohm. Yes or no? So this is your 20 ohm. 0 and 0 is cancelled out. This is 2 and 5. So VAQ is given to me, or is I can actually find out VAQ is equals to 1 upon 5 volt. Is that a yes or no? So I know the value of VAQ, that is 1 upon 5 volt, right? Okay, so put this value of VAQ here in the first one, right? So when I put it here, you will get 1 upon 5 is actually equals to K times of LAQ. Now LAQ is also given to me. LAQ is actually 10 meter. Yes or no? Okay, so this is times of 10 meter, or I can simply say K is actually equal to 1 upon 50. Yes or no? So 1 upon 50 is the potential gradient. Now I know the value of potential gradient. All I have to do is put it here. Yes or no? So when I put it here, you will get your EMF is actually equals to 1 upon 50 multiplied by LAO. LAO is given to me, that is your 6. The balancing length is given to me, that is 6. This is 2, 3 just 6, 2, 25, right? So this is 3 upon 25. And when you calculate it, okay, you have the value is in points, so just simply just divide this. So you have 3, 25, 25 is 0, 0, this is 30, 25, 1, 25, this is 5, this is 25, 2, 50. So the value is coming out to be 0.12 volt, right? So yes, fourth option is the correct one. I hope that is understandable. Yes. Okay, if that is true, let's move forward. Okay, this is the question of current sensitivity. Okay, great. So this is question number 38. Let's try to do this. The current sensitivity of a galvanometer is increased by 20%. Okay, if its resistance also increases by 25%, the voltage sensitivity will decrease by 1, increase by 5, increased by 10, decreased by 4%. Okay, now we have to understand the voltage sensitivity is also written as current sensitivity divided by the resistance. This is one formula which we have to remember, which I'm sure all of you remember, right? Okay, so voltage sensitivity is given as current sensitivity divided by the resistance. So in the question it is said the current sensitivity of the galvanometer is increased by 20. So this has been increased, right? And the resistance is also been increased. So CS and R both are increased, right? So let's say, let me just write it. So it is increased by 20%, the current sensitivity, right? So current sensitivity has been increased by 20%. So this is 20 by 100. Or I can simply say, so CS by 5. So I can write new current sensitivity will be equal to, yes, the old one plus the new one, Cs by 5. So this will be equal to, yes, this will be equal to 6 Cs upon 5. This is the new current sensitivity. Very similarly, let's talk about resistance here. Resistance is increased by 25%, but 25, and this is 4. So this is R by 4, right? So the new resistance will be equal to R plus the increment, right? So this will be equals to 5 times of R by 4, right? So if we got the new current sensitivity, we got the new resistance. Now let's talk about the new voltage sensitivity. New voltage sensitivity will be new current sensitivity divided by new resistance. Yes or no? So new one is having a value of 6 Cs upon 5, 6 Cs upon 5 divided by the new resistance. New resistance will be having 5 R upon 4. Yes or no? So this is 6 Cs upon 5 multiplied by 4 upon 5 R, right? So this will be entirely 6 into 4 multiplied by 5 into 5 times of the old one, or I can simply say the old current sensitivity, right? So this is 6 for the 20, this is 25. 20 upon 25 times of current sensitivity. Is that a yes or no? Yes. Okay, great. Sorry, 6 for the 24, right? It's not 20. I'm really sorry. So this is actually equal to, this is 24 upon 25, right? 24 upon 25 times of Cs, right? Okay, great. So you are supposed to find out whether it is increase or decrease, right? So that can be find out new value of current sensitivity minus the old value of current sensitivity divided by old value of current sensitivity multiplied by 100. This is how we actually find out the percentage increase or decrease, right? So new value is actually 24 upon 25 times of current sensitivity minus what is your old value. Old value is simply current sensitivity, yes or no, divided by the current sensitivity multiplied by 100. Let's try to do this. So this will be, yes, 25. This is 24 minus 25 times of current sensitivity divided by current sensitivity multiplied by 100. So current sensitivity and current sensitivity will cancel each other out, and you will have minus 1 upon 25 times of 100, and this will be actually the percentage. This entire thing is actually the percentage, right? Okay, this is 25 4. So the answer is minus 4 percentage. Yes or no? So the new voltage sensitivity will be decreased by 4 percentage, right? That is what it's stating. So yeah, option number 4, decreased by 4 percentage. I hope that is understandable. Yes or no? Right. Okay, let's move forward. Now let's look at question number 39. Question number 39 says 3 infinitely long parallel straight current carrying wires A, B and C are kept at equal distances from each other as shown in the figure. Alright, we can actually see the figure here. We have wire A, wire B and wire C. They are kept at equal distances. That is, the distance between them is actually R. Alright. The wire C experiences a net force F. Alright, so this wire C is experiencing a net force F. Obviously, this net force F is experienced because of the current that is being flowing from your wire A and wire B. Alright, okay, great. The net force on wire C when the current in the wire A is reversed. So the question is asking what will happen to the net force F if the current, which is like flowing right now, which is like flowing like this, if I reverse the direction of the current, then what is going to happen to the force, the net force that is experienced by your, C wire, right? So that is the question. We have 4 options: 0, F by 2, F and 2F. All right. So let's first talk about what is this net force that is being experienced by this C wire because of the combined effect of both A and B, right? Okay. So let's first talk about the effect of B on C, right? So we have this B wire which is like infinitely long, and some I current is being flowing through this, in this B wire, and the distance between your C wire and your B wire is actually R, right? And we can, with the help of your right hand thumb rule, we can find out the direction of magnetic field, right, that will be produced because of the current that is being carried by your B on your wire C. So when I do the right hand thumb rule, right, so when I do that, I can very nicely see the magnetic field is actually in this direction, which is like going inside the board. Is that a yes or no? Right, I'm strictly talking about here the B wire. Because of the current that is flowing in your B wire, the magnetic field is going inside the board at your wire C. Is that a yes or no? So you have to understand, and also the current is flowing in that direction, that is your length vector will be in that direction, and the magnetic field is actually inside. So if that is true, so with the help of your, again, you can use Fleming's left hand rule or you can use right hand thumb rule. So with that, we can find out the direction of force experienced by this wire, the force that is going to be experienced by this wire C. So when I do, so basically the force will be in the direction of L cross B, right? So curl your finger, right finger, from your L to B. So when I curl it L to B, so just curl it with me. So when I curl it, I'm actually finding my force to be in that direction, right? So for example, if this is my wire C, the current is flowing in this direction, and the magnetic field, because of your current that is being flowing in your B, is in inward direction, right? So actually I'm finding my force on C wire because of B in that direction. Is that a yes or no? Right? Okay, so if that is understandable, let's talk about your wire A. Let's Let's just forget that there is a wire B in between. Just forget about that for time being. So I have this wire A right now, in which your 2I current is being flowing, and you have to find out what is the effect of the force, or because there is this 2I current that is flowing from your wire A, right? There will be a magnetic field effect on this particular wire, and because of that there will be a force, right? So we have to find out what is that force, right? Okay, so obviously you guys can see, again, you can use right hand thumb rule to find out the magnetic field again. So when I do that magnetic field, when I find out the magnetic field, again you will get to see the magnetic field is still still inside the board, right? Still inside the board. I hope you guys can get that, right? Okay, so if that is true, again, same thing, you have to understand, this is your C wire, magnetic field is actually inside, right? Your length vector will again in the direction of your current, right? Again, with the help of your L cross B rule or the right hand thumb rule, when I find out the direction of your force which the wire C will be experiencing because of the current that is flowing in your A wire, will be simply in which direction? Just do the right hand thumb rule. So when I do the right hand thumb rule, just do it with me. So when I do it, again, the force is in that direction, force on C because of A. Is that a yes or no? Right? So the combined effect, let's say this is force on C because of B, and also same direction the next force will also be, that is force on C because of A, right? So basically FCA plus FCB will result into the net force that the question is talking about, that is the F, right? I hope that is understandable, right? Now the question is asking what will happen if the current in your wire A is reversed, right? So the difference now here is that in your A wire, I'm actually reversing the direction of current, right? Everything is same, current is same. The only thing that I did is I reversed direction of your current, right? Okay, so let's try to understand what is going to happen when you reverse it, right? Here I current is flowing, here also I current is flowing. This is your C. Now nothing will happen to these two, right? Because everything is same here, right? So again, everything is same, then we can simply write it here. Let me just very quickly write it here. So let's say if this is your C, then obviously this will experience a force in this direction because of the effect of your B, right? So I can write it, force on C because of B will be in that direction, right? So that is not going to change, right? Let's talk about what is going to happen when the direction is changed, right? So when the direction is changed, you have to understand, when when you find out the magnetic field again with the help of your right hand thumb rule, the magnetic field produced by your A on your C wire, you will get to know that this time the magnetic field is actually coming out of the board. It is not inside the board, it is this time coming out of the board. Yes or no? So that means here the length vector is in that direction, right? And the magnetic field is actually coming out of the board, right? So again, when I do the right hand thumb rule to find out the force experienced by this C because of the current that is flowing through your A, so you will see L cross B. So when I do this, L cross B, so when I do this L cross B, you will get to know that your force this time is actually in the opposite direction of that of your previous one, right? So this will be force on C at A. Yes or no? So I can write it here. The force experienced by C because of A. Now this time you have to understand this force and this force, they both are in opposite direction. Is that a yes or no? Both the forces are in opposite direction, right? So this is something which you have to understand, right? You can find out the force, that is the magnitude of FCB, that is the force on C because of B, right? We can actually find out. So we just simply write it here. Force on C because of B will be equal to nu naught multiplied by both the current that is being flowing, I multiplied by I, right? Multiply by length. Now length here is infinite, so I'll just simply write some L length, right? I'm not writing infinity here, just for time being, you have to bear with me, right? Divided by 2 pi and the distance between them, that is your R. So this is the magnitude of FCB. On the other hand, when I talk about FCA, that is the force on C because of A. Now difference here is the distance here is actually 2R. Now you have to understand distance here is actually 2R, and the current from your first one is I and the second one is 2I, right? So I can write it here. FCA will be equal to, yes, this is nu naught multiplied by I multiplied by 2I. Yes or no? Then length will again remain same, divided by, this will be actually 2 pi, and again distance here is 2R. Is that a yes or no? Right? Okay, great. So you have to understand this 2 will be cancelled with this 2, right? And again, if you guys see, the FCA is again coming out to be the same thing, that is nu naught multiplied by I into L upon 2 pi R. You guys can see this magnitude and this magnitude, both the magnitude are same. So if both the magnitude are same and the direction is opposite to each other, tell me, what is the net force? What is the net force? Will they cancel each other out? Yes or no? Right. So the net force will be equal to 0. Net force will be equal to 0. I hope that is understandable. Yes. Okay, let's look at our options. Yes, 0 is there in our option. Answer is net force will be equal to 0. I hope that is understandable, right? Okay, let's move to the next question. Okay, question number 40. Question number 40 says, in a hydrogen atom, the electron moves in an orbit of radius 0.5 Armstrong, okay, making 10 revolutions per second. The magnetic moment associated with the orbital motion of electron will be. Okay, now this type of questions we have already done. So basically what is happening here, you have an hydrogen nucleus and then the electron is revolving around this nucleus, right? So now in the question, and the radius is also given to us, radius is given 0.5 angstrom naught, right? Radius is given to us. Now here you have to understand okay, it is making 10 revolutions. So basically we are given frequency 10 revolution per second. Frequency is actually given to us, right? Now we know whenever frequency is given, right, and we are supposed to find out the current, right? So here the magnetic moment associated with the orbital motion. So magnetic moment is we are supposed to find out. Now so we know magnetic moment is actually given as I times of A, right? I times of A. This is how you actually find out your magnetic moment, right? Here I is the current and A is the area of the figure that we are talking about, right? I is actually the current, right? Now again I'm supposed to find out the current and the revolution is given. So we have studied, so whenever this kind of situation happen, the current is given as q times of the frequency. Is that a yes or no? This is how we actually find out, right? So now let's talk about current first. So current can be given as q is the charge on electron, right? So we all know charge on electron is actually 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 90 with a negative sign, right? Okay, all right, multiplied by the frequency. Now frequency is given to us, that is 10. So just multiply with 10, the current will be actually equal to, so I'll just ignoring the negative sign, the current will be 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 18, and this is actually coulomb. So this much current is being flown, right? All right, now the current is given to us. Now and also this is actually doing a circular motion. So basically area will be actually equal to pi r square. Pi r square will be actually equal to area, right? And the value of pi is 3.14 multiplied by radius will be actually equal to 0.5 into 10 to the power minus 10. We all know 1 epsilon is actually equal to 10 to the power minus 10 meter. Yes or no? So this is 10 to the power minus 10 to the power 2 or square, right? So all we have to do is multiply. M will be actually equal to, yes, I is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 18 multiplied by the area is 3.14 multiplied by 0.5 into 10 to the power minus 10 to the power 10, right? So when you do the calculation, you will get a final result of approximately equal to 1.27 into 10 to the power minus 33, right? Now this approximate value you can actually find out, and this will be unit will be ampere meter square, right? So let's see if it is there. This is approximate value. The option which is like closer to this one is actually, okay, the second one, 1.256. It is actually closer to our answer, right? So your answer is option number 2, that is 1.256. Yes, okay, I hope that is understandable. Let's move to the next question. Okay, this is next question. Question number 41. An air core solenoid with length 30 centimeter, area of cross section 25 centimeters square, and number of turns 800, all right, carries a current of 2.5 ampere, all right. The current is suddenly switched off in a brief time of 10 to the power minus 3 seconds. Okay, ignoring the variation in the magnetic field near the ends of the solenoid, the average back EMF induced across the ends of the open switch in the circuit would be, all right. So basically you have a solenoid. So solenoid, we know something like this. So I have a solenoid side, right? So solenoid has a length of 30 centimeters. So this is 30 centimeter long solenoid, all right. Now what else is given to us? Area of cross section. So basically solenoid can be assumed to have a circular kind of area, right? So area of cross section is given to us, that is 25 centimeter square. Very good. And what else is given to us? It has 800 number of turns, right? So number of turns is actually given to us, right? That is the value of n, number of turns is given to us, that is 800 turns are there, right? Okay, great. Then carries a current of 2.5 ampere. So current is also given. Current is actually 2.5 ampere, that is like flowing inside your solenoid, all right. Okay, all these things are given to us. Now we are supposed to find, so basically the current has been stopped for 10 to the power minus 3 seconds. So because of this stopping of the current, there must be some change in the flux, and when the change in the flux is there must be an EMF, right? Okay, so the question is asking us to find out that EMF, right? Okay, so we all know, with the help of Faraday's law, I can write my EMF is actually equals to minus of d phi upon dt. Is that a yes or no? Where d phi is actually the change in flux, right, divided by the time it has taken for that change, right? Time it has taken for the change. Yes or no? I hope that is understandable, right? Okay, so basically you can simply say, you can simplify this thing as E is equals to, so I can simply write it here like this. So final flux minus initial flux, right, with a negative sign divided by the time. Now the time is actually given to me, that is 10 to the power minus 3 second, right? Because for that small interval of time, the current was switched off, right? So phi 2 is the final flux, right, and phi 1 is the initial flux, right? I'm actually writing it like that, right? Okay, now let's talk about phi 1 first. So phi 1 is actually the flux before, the I can simply write phi 1 is actually the flux before the current is being switched off. Current is being switched off, right? Switched off. And what is your phi 2? Phi 2 is the flux after current, current is switched off. So obviously switched off. So obviously, so phi 2 value will actually come out to be 0, right? So because when the current is switched off, then obviously the magnetic field is simply given as nu naught Ni. So it depends upon the current. If the current is gone, the magnetic field will not be there. If magnetic field is not there, then flux will not be there, right? Okay, so in your second condition, that phi 2 is actually directly equal to 0, phi 1 is something which I have to find out, right? Because in order to find out your phi 1, you need to first find out your magnetic field, right? So we know magnetic field is actually given as, so magnetic field inside your solenoid is given as nu naught times n times of I, right? Okay, so nu naught is the constant, n is number of turns per unit length, right? N is number of turns per unit, so this is n upon length, number of turns per unit, and I is the current, right? So I is the current. Now these things are given to us. Nu naught has a value, let me just write, nu naught has a value of 4 pi into 10 to the power minus 7, right, multiplied by number of turns is actually 800 divided by length is 30 centimeter, so I can write it 0.30 meter, right? 30 centimeter converted into meter, this is 0.30 meter, multiplied by the current is actually 2.5 ampere, right? So this is actually the magnetic field, right, in the first case, right? All right, so I know the magnetic field here, right? So I know the magnetic field here, so I can actually find out the flux. I can actually find out the flux, that is the flux 1, initial flux, right? So initial flux is actually given as, yes, this is number of turns multiplied by B multiplied by the area, right? B times of area, and because there are like n number of turns, so you just multiply with n, right? So n is given to you, that is your 800, multiplied by magnetic flux is given, that is 4 pi into 10 to the power minus 7, right, multiplied by 800 divided by 0.30 into 2.5, then multiply it with the area, right? You have to multiply it with the area. Now area is also given to us in the question. Area is actually given 25 centimeter square, right? So 25 centimeter square, just convert it into meter square. So this will be 25. When you convert it 25 centimeter into meter, that will come out to be 25 into 10 to the power minus 2. So when you convert 25 centimeter square into meter square, this will be 10 to the power minus 4. I hope that is understandable, right? So when we do all the calculation, the answer comes out to be 16.75 into 10 to the power minus 3 Weber, right? This is the magnetic flux, right? Now let's do it here, right? Because we don't have space, so I'll just do it here only, right? The next part I'll just do it here in this particular space, right? Okay, now very quickly, phi 2 is actually 0, phi 1 is actually 16.75 into 10 to the power minus 3 Weber, right? And the time is actually given, that is 10 to the power minus 3 seconds, right? So the flux is actually equal to minus of d phi by dt, right? Okay, so minus of, you can write it, phi 2 minus phi 1 upon 10 to the power minus 3. So just when you solve this, you have minus, and phi 2 value has a 0 minus of your 16.75 into 10 to the power minus 3, right? And you divide it by 10 to the power minus 3. This will cancel out. The final answer will be, yes, the final answer will be 16.75, volt. Is that a yes or no? 16.75 volt. And I hope that is there in a, yes, it is there in our option. It is 16.75 volt. Is that a yes or no? I hope you guys, you can just do the calculation. The only thing you have to do here is the calculation. Rest other is very easy. The calculation part is a little bit tricky. So you can do the calculation and we'll get the exact same values, right? Okay, I hope that is understandable. Yes. Okay, let's move forward if that is understandable. Okay, let's move to question number 42. Okay, a sinusoidal voltage of peak value 283 volt and frequency 50 hertz is applied to a series LCR circuit in which R is equals to 3 ohm, L is equal to 25.48 millihenry, C is 796 microfarad. Then the power dissipated at the resonant condition will be. All right. So we have LCR circuit. So we have LCR, that means we have inductor, then we have capacitor, then we have resistor, which is like connected with an AC source, right? Now this AC source has a peak voltage, which is like V0 is actually given, that is 283 volt. All right, very good. So the value of this will have XL, this will have a capacitive reactance of XC, this will have a resistance of R, right? Now XL is given to us. Is it given? No, it is not given, sorry. XL is not given, it is L is given to us, 25.48 millihenry. Capacitance is actually given 796 microfarad. All right, resistance is actually given 3 ohm, right? Okay, now we know the peak value of your voltage, right? Peak value of voltage is given to us. Now one important information is also given in the question, the resonant condition. So basically the resonance is happening. So when resonance happens, we all know your XL actually becomes equal to your XC. And when that happens, you have to understand the effect of your resistance because of your XL and because of a capacitor will reduce. So as it reduces, the maximum current will flow through your circuit, right? So you have to understand the current will become maximum. So current will become maximum means the current that is flowing will be IRMS. IRMS means I naught by root 2. This current will flow through your circuit, right? Okay, so you have to understand in your resonance condition, IRMS current will flow. So basically the only thing that we are left with in your resonant condition is the resistance of the wire. Is that a yes or no? This is the only thing which will be left, right? These two effects will cancel each other out, right? Because both the the inductive reactance and the inductive capacitance will be equal at this time at the resonance condition, right? So we are supposed to find out the power dissipated, right? So the formula for power dissipated is equals to I square R, right? So you have to understand I will be I max square R, right? I max square R. So I need to find out the value of maximum current, right? Now that we can easily find out. How we can find out? All we have to do is we have to apply the Ohm's law. So Ohm's law is VRMS, that is maximum voltage, will be actually equals to IRMS times your resistance. V is equals to IR, right? Okay, so VRMS is simply given as V0 by root 2, right? And that is actually equal to I naught by root 2 multiplied by the resistance. Yes or no? Root 2 and root 2 will cancel out. Your V0 value is actually given to us. The maximum peak value is given to us, that is 283 volt. And that is equals to I naught is something which I have to find out, multiplied by resistance value is also given, that is 3 ohm. So I got the value of I naught to be 283 upon 3 ampere. This is the value of I naught. Now I naught I know. The value of I naught I know. So all I have to do is put it in the power equation, right? So the power dissipated will be equal to I max square. Now I max means that is IRMS square, right? This is IRMS square multiplied by R, or you can write IRMS is actually equals to I naught by root 2, right, whole square multiplied by R. Is that a yes or no? So this is actually equals to half multiplied by I naught square. Now I naught is actually known to us. It is 283 by 3 whole square, right? 283 by 3 whole square multiplied by resistance is also known to us, that is 3. So this will cancel out, and we can do the further calculation. And when I do the further calculation, the answer comes out to be, yes, 13.35 kilowatt. This is the answer. When you do the calculation, the answer comes out to be 13.35 kilowatt, right? And it is there in our equation, that is 13.35 kilowatt. I hope that is understandable. Yes. All right, let's move to our next question, if that is understandable. Question number 43. Yes, question number 43. A circular loop of radius 0.3 centimeter lies parallel to much bigger circular of radius 20 centimeter. Okay, great. The center of the small loop is on the axis of the bigger loop. All right, the distance between the centers is 15 centimeter. Okay, if a current of 2 ampere flows to the smaller loop, then the flux link with the bigger loop is, okay, this is a good question. So we have to first draw the diagram. A circular loop of radius 0.3. So basically you have two loops here. One is actually the bigger loop, and then there is one more which is like smaller loop, and both the loops have the same centers. You have to understand, both the loops have same centers, right? So let me just say this radius is some, R2 radius, and this radius is some R1 radius. All right, okay, let's say distance between them is actually some D, although in the question it is given to us, right? So in the question you guys can see, R1 is given to us, this is 0.3 into 10 to the power minus 2 meter. R2 is also given, that is 20 into 10 to the power minus 2 meter. If you guys see, it's given to us, right? And also distance is also given, that is your distance is actually 15 centimeter, right? So it's 15 into 10 to the power minus 2. So all these distances are given. I'm just still putting it R2, R1, so that we can actually solve them, right? Okay, now we are supposed to find out if the current of 2 ampere, the current is also given. So you guys can simply write, okay, let's say in your first loop some I1 current is flowing, in your second loop some I2 current is flowing, right? So I1 current is actually given to me, that is your 2 ampere. So 2 ampere current is given, smaller loop, then the flux link with the bigger loop is. So this is a mutual induction question. So you are supposed to find out, as I1 current is flowing through your first loop, then what is the flux induced, what is the flux linked because of the current I1 flowing through your smaller one? That is the question that we have to answer. This is actually a simple question. Now you have to understand, obviously the current that is being flowing here, because of this current there will be magnetic field, right? And that magnetic field will pass through this particular circular loop, and because of that there will be some flux change, right? Now we have to find out that flux change, right? Now in order to find out, let's say the flux that is linked to your second loop is simply equal to the mutual inductance between the between both the loops multiplied by the current that is flowing through your first loop, right? Now this is given to me in the question. I do not know the value of M. That is the problem. I do not know the value of mutual inductions, right? That is the main problem. So I have to find out the value of M, then only I can solve this, then only I can find out the value of phi 2, right? So in order to solve this, what I will assume that, okay, mutual induction is actually a constant between any two loop, right? So what I will do here, I will simply assume that, let's say some I2 current is being flowing through your loop second. Now because of this I2 current, there will be some kind of flux that will be induced in your first loop, right? And for that also you will have the same value of mutual inductance. Yes or no? This is something which we have studied, right? We have proved M12 is actually equals to M21, right? For any two coil in which your primary coil was there, in your secondary coil was there. So that exercise we have already done, right? So with that exercise we got to know that M12 is actually equals to M21, that is for any two particular, any two particular loops, the mutual inductance, right, will be same for any two particular configuration, right? Okay, so what I will do here, I will simply say, okay, so because of this current, that is I2 current that is being flowing through your this loop, I will talk about the magnetic field at the axial position at here, right? So at this axial position, I will find out, obviously we know the magnetic field will be in this direction at the axial position because of this current that is being flowing through your second loop. So I will find out the value of that current, and we all know we have a simple formula for that. So I'll just write it here. Magnetic field MB, not MB, magnetic field due to current loop 2, right, that is your second one, bigger loop, at the axial point. Let me just simply say some point. Let's say this is some point A, at the axial point A, right? Okay, great. So that will be, let me call it magnetic field 2. That will be actually equal to, this is nu naught times, what is the current flowing through your second one, that is your I2 current, multiplied by the radius square, divided by 2 will be there, and this will be the distance here. Distance is actually d square plus the radius 2 whole square to the power 3/2. This is the magnitude here, right? And direction is anyway is in that direction, right? Okay, now when I know the value of B2, I can find out the value of flux, right? So I can write it here, flux linked. So the flux linked with smaller loop will be LWP. Yes, small loop will be simply equals to, so I'll just say flux linked is phi1, and that is equal to the magnetic field, the magnetic field which is like passing through that, right? That is your B2. The magnetic field because of your second loop will be passing through that link, right? Multiplied by the area of the first one, right? Is that a yes or no? So I can simply write phi1 is actually equals to this multiplied by the area. So I'll just write nu naught. I'll put the values later. I'll just first let's solve this. I'll put the values later. 2d square plus r2 whole square to the power 3/2 multiplied by area. Area of the first one is actually a circular loop, so this is pi times of r1 square. So I now know the value of flux that is passing through your small loop, right? Also, again, the same mutual induction formula, I can use it here. Now what is the concept here? Because of this I2 current that is being flowing through your second loop, right, there will be some kind of flux induced or the flux change through your second loop, right? And that we can simply find out. So the flux that is being changed in your first loop because of your second loop, the current that is flowing through your second loop will be actually equals to the mutual induction, the same mutual induction, right, multiplied by how much current that is flowing through your neighboring loop, that is your bigger loop, right? Is that a yes or no? So I know the value of phi, I know the value of I2 here also, or simply the I2 value will cancel out. So flux value is given to me, that is your nu naught I2 r2 square multiplied by pi r1 square upon 2 d square plus r2 square to the power 3/2 is actually equals to m times of I2. So this I2 and I2 will cancel out. So I now this time I know the value of m. The value of m is nu naught times r2 square multiplied by pi r1 square upon 2 d square plus r2 square to the power 3/2. So I know the value of m. Now when I know the value of m, all I have to do is put this value in that equation. Now I can actually find out the flux that is is being changing from your loop 2 because of the current that is flowing through your first smaller loop, right? So phi2 will be actually equal to m is nu2 r2 square multiplied by pi r1 square divided by 2 times of d square plus r2 square times of 3/2, and the current is I1. All you have to do is put the values. Phi2 will be actually equals to nu naught is actually 4 pi into 10 to the power minus 7 multiplied by r2 is given to you. You guys can see r2 is 20 into 10 to the power minus 2, right? So r2 is 20 into 10 to the power minus 2 whole square multiplied by pi. Pi is 3.14 multiplied by R1. What is R1? R1 is 0.3 multiplied by 10 to the power minus 2, right? 0.3 multiplied by 10 to the power minus 2, and this is whole square divided by 2. Distance between your loops. Distance between the loop is actually 15. Yes or no? So this is actually 15 into 10 to the power minus 2, again whole square, plus radius 2. Now radius 2, what is your radius 2? It's again 20 into 10 to the power minus 2. So you can write it here 20 into 10 to the power minus 2 whole square, right, to the power 3 by 2 multiplied by the current I1, right? So current I1 is actually given 2 ampere. So you have to multiply it with 2 ampere. Is that a yes or no? So when you solve all these questions, you just solve it, right? Take some time and solve it. Right now I'm actually making a video. I don't want to solve it. So the answer you will get will be 9.1 into 10 to the power minus 11 Weber, right? This will be the flux through your higher loop because of the current that is being flowing because in the smaller loop, right? So the answer is the fourth one, 9.1 into 10 to the minus 11 Weber, right? I hope that is understandable. Yes. Okay, let's move to the next one. Okay, question number 44. 44 is saying if both the number of turns and the core length of an inductor is doubled, keeping other factors constant, there must be a space here. Okay, keeping other factors constant, then its self inductance will be. So basically you have a coil through which your varying current IT is actually flowing. Now when that happens, we know the self inductance is actually given as nu naught times n square upon L times the area. This is the value of self inductance, right? Okay, for a simple coil, right, for a simple solenoid. So if both the number of turns and the core length of the inductor is doubled, number of turns, this is your number of turns and this is the length, right, core length it's given. So you are increasing that, you are doubling that, and other factors are remaining constant, then what will happen? So basically we can see, so your L is actually equal to nu naught, you double the number of turns, this becomes 2n square, and you have double the core length also, this become 2 times of L multiplied by rest other things are remaining the same, right? Area is same, all the other things are same. Okay, so this will be nu naught, this will become 4 times of n square multiplied by area upon this is 2L, or you can say 2 to 4. So the L will be actually equal to nu naught times 2 will come out, nu naught times n square upon L multiplied by A. So the self inductance will be becoming 2 times of the previous one. So it will become double actually. Yes, the double is there in the option, so it will actually become double. I hope that is understandable. Yes. Okay, let's move to our next question. Now 45, 46 and 47 and 48 and 49. So all the rest of the questions are your assertion and reason based questions. So let's try to solve them. Assertion, reason based questions. So you will be having two, will be having assertion, you will be having reason. You have to talk about out of these 4 which option is most suitable, right? Okay. So given below are 2 statements labeled as assertion and reason. So let's read the statement here. So for 45th assertion is, to increase the range of an ammeter, we must connect a suitable high resistance in series. No. So if you want to increase the range of an ammeter, so we know that in ammeter, the resistance is actually connected in parallel, right? We call it shunt resistance. Yes or no? So increase the range of the ammeter, we must connect a suitable high resistance in series. This statement is actually wrong. The ammeter with increased range should have high resistance. This is also actually wrong. So as it is connected in parallel, so if the range is increased, the resistance will actually be low because it is connected in it's connected in parallel. So if it was connected in series, then it would have been higher. So I think both the statement are wrong. So let's see if both A and R are true and R is correct. No, this is wrong. Both A and R are true, but R is not the correct explanation. Again wrong. A is true, but R is false. Again wrong. A is false and R is also false. Yes, this seems right. Both the statements are false. Your assertion is also false and the reason is anyway false, right? Okay, let's move to question number 46. Question number 46. Given below are two statements. Label, okay, again, same thing. So you have two statements. Let's talk about that. An electron has a high potential energy. All right. An electron has a high potential energy when it is at a location associated with a more negative value of potential, and a low potential energy when at a location associated with a more positive potential. I think the statement is right, because obviously electron has a negative charge. First of all, electron has a negative. So first thing we have to understand, electron has a negative charge. So minus E is the charge, right? So if you want to find out the potential energy, so potential energy is basically the work done, right? Work done that is stored, the work done that is work done against your conservative force, right? So you can write work done is actually equal to your potential energy, and that is actually equals to q times of the potential, right? So if your charge is negative already, so if you place it at a positive potential, then the potential energy will be negative. Can you guys understand that? On the other hand, if the potential is negative, then your potential energy will be positive, right? So if they go, now read it again. An electron has a high potential energy when it is at a location associated with a more negative value. So if you put your electron with a negative potential, then final potential will be positive, and the potential will be higher as compared to a lower potential energy when at a location associated with a more positive potential. So if you put it, your electron with a higher potential value, then again, because of the negative sign of the electron, the potential energy will still remain negative, right? I hope you guys can understand that, right? So assertion is actually a correct statement here. Okay, then reason electrons move from a region of higher potential to region of lower potential. Electron move from a region of higher potential to a lower potential. Okay, now we know that, let's say if you have this higher potential here, and let's say if you had a lower potential here, and you place an electron here, then we all know what is going to happen. Electron is actually be attracted towards your higher potential. Yes or no, right? Because they will be having electric field. Because the electric field, the electron will travel in the opposite direction. So according to this question, according to this reason, the reason is saying that your electron move from region of higher potential to the region of lower potential. Higher potential means electron move from positive to negative, which is clearly wrong, right? Because electron is actually moving from negative to positive, right? So the opposite is correct. So this statement is actually wrong. Only statement A is correct. I hope you guys can understand, right? So basically correct. So both A and R are true. No, this is false. Both A and R are true. Again, false. A is true, but R is false. Yes, this is actually the correct statement. A is true, but R is false, right? Okay, I hope that's understandable. Let's move to question number 47. Okay, question number 47 says, assertion. A magnetic needle free to rotate in vertical plane orients itself with its axis vertical to the poles of the earth. Actually, it is right statement. At the poles of the earth, the horizontal component of earth's magnetic field will be 0. Yes, both the statement are correct. And actually, as the horizontal component is actually 0, that is why your magnetic needle orient itself with the axis, with the vertical axis of the pole, because obviously there is no horizontal component, so it will automatically orient itself with the vertical axis of the pole, right? So both the statement is correct, and the reason is also correct. I hope you guys can understand, right? This is a conceptual question. This is a very straightforward question. So yeah, both A and R are true, and R is the correct explanation of A, right? Both the things are correct. All right, let's move to question number 48. All right, question number 48, assertion. A proton and an electron with same momenta. Okay, so we have a proton, we have an electron, they both have same momenta, right? Enter in a magnetic field in a direction at the right angle to the lines of the force. All right, the radius of the path followed by them will be same. Okay, now this is something which I have to find out. Okay, let's talk about so we have a proton and we have an electron, right? So proton is positively charged, and if positively charged particle enters perpendicularly, let's say magnetic field is actually inside, and let's say it enters per point. So obviously this is going to, do a circular motion which will be having some radius, let's say radius of your proton particle, right? Very similarly, on the other hand, if you have electron, then obviously electron is moving like this, then obviously it will also be in circular motion, but this time the direction will be different. So this, let's say the electron has a radius of the path to be re, right? Okay, so we know that your magnetic Lorentz force will be equal to centripetal force. Now that is something which we all know. So magnetic Lorentz force is actually Q times VB. Now sine 90 is actually 0. Sorry, sine 90 is actually 1. So this will be Q. So let's talk about proton. So for proton, it will be VB, and that is equals to m times your velocity square upon the radius of proton. Yes or no? So this V and V will cancel out, and you will get your E times of B is actually equals to mv times of radius of proton, right? Or you can write radius of proton is actually equals to mv times of EB, right? Where your m times of V is actually the momentum of your proton. Yes or no? I hope you guys can understand. This is actually the momentum of your proton. Let me write it PP, right? Very similarly, you can write for electron also. So for electron, you have to understand again, charge is E VB multiplied by mv square upon the radius of your electron. Again, V will be cancelled out here, and radius of electron is again coming out to be mv upon E times of B, right? So magnetic field is same, the charge is also same, and the momentum is actually same. So the radius E must be equal to radius of proton. I hope you guys can understand. So radius must be equal. Yes, so the first statement is actually true. I hope you guys can understand. First statement is actually true. I'll just erase this because we have to talk about the second 49th question also we have to do, right? So this statement is actually true. Electron has less mass than the proton. Yes, electron has less mass. Electron has less mass than proton. Proton has a higher mass and electron has a less mass. That is, this statement is actually true, but there is no relation of the reason here. Okay, so both the statement are right, but both are not connected, right? So you can simply write it here. So the first one, both A are true and R is the correct. So this is wrong. Both A are true, but R is not the correct explanation also. This is actually correct. Second one is correct. All right, last question of your section B. Let's talk about this one. Given below are the two statements. Okay, assertion: on increasing the current sensitivity of galvanometer by increasing the number of turns, may not necessarily increase its voltage sensitivity. Now we all know voltage sensitivity is actually given as current sensitivity upon the resistance, right? Okay, now it's given on increasing the current sensitivity of a galvanometer by increasing the number of turns, right? So you have increased the number of turns in your current sensitivity formula, may not necessarily increase the voltage sensitivity. Why? Because obviously, so number of turns are increased, with that number of turns the resistance will also increase. You have to understand. So number of turns, so you are actually increasing the length of your wire, the resistance will automatically increase. So as you increase the number of length, also the resistance will increase and the effect will cancel each other out. You have to understand that. So reason is the resistance of the coil of the galvanometer increases on increasing the number of turns. Yes, correct. So both the statement are correct, and actually reason is actually the reason for your assertion, right? So here both A and R are true, and R is the correct explanation of A. This is very true. I hope you understood all of the questions. So if you have any doubt, you can actually comment it down in the comment section, right? Okay, so section B part is done, right? We have already done section A. You guys can go check that out, and the link will be there. I will share the link in the description. And also section C will be coming, so you have to wait for that. Just stay tuned for that. So that's all for today. Thank you and have a nice